have Tanja and Tamara, and I want to thank you so much for being here for the group, the Amazon Bestsellers Challenge. You both work as a team, correct?
Yeah. We are the two halves of Team TNT Editing for Tanja and Tamara.
TNT, that's I see. And you have recently started working with Hay House as well, right?
We're doing a freelance project for them, yeah.
That's right. So previously I had a client who was self-publishing, so she self-published a book, and then she was taken up by Hay House. So I helped her edit her first book, and then she got taken up by Hay House, has published one with them already, and we're working with her on her second book with them. So when it came time for her to do her second book, she asked whether Hay House could contact us and edit with us. So we did.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, and now you will keep on working with Hay House and editing books for them?
We've only agreed to do this book with them. We would love to do more stuff with them, of course, but that depends. It's just the one book contract.
Okay, I see. So today we would like to speak both about copy and about editing, okay? Because it is very important, I believe. Both things are very important for people who want to promote their books. So we have been recently talking about the introductions of the books. And what I realized is that most people don't really understand what an introduction is. They think that it is something like explaining what the book is about, which isn't exactly that, the introduction, okay? So would you like to tell me how important is the introduction of a book, and how would it be better to be structured for both fiction and non-fiction?
So I'm going to let Tamara field this because she's a structural expert.
Okay.
That's right. Okay, so introductions, I mean, they're funny things. They do tell you what the book is about, but they also have to really hook the reader in. So essentially what you're trying to do with an introduction is interest somebody and tell them enough of a story that they actually want to read more. So you do need to say where you're going to take your reader. You're going to say, oh, this happened to me, then I did this, and life was amazing after that. For example, that's a very simple way of doing it. But, then it needs to be inspiring. I can tell you how that happens as well. I can tell you what I did and take you on that journey if that's where you are in your life. So that's a general sort of self-helpish introduction. It needs to inspire people. It needs to hook them in. And the most effective introductions do that through story, because humans, we love stories. We're storytelling animals, basically. We make meaning through story. So a good introduction really plays on that, tells a good story, but it isn't totally selfish. It's not totally self-directed. It's not narcissistic. It's not, I did this and I did that and you all need to listen to me. It's, it really relates it back to the reader. So it's always turning away from the self and thinking about what the reader does. So a good introduction sort of, a lot of them start with a bit of story, then do a bit of backtracking and then go into, and in this book, this is what we'll do. So it's quite a simple, structured process, really. And there are questions that you can ask yourself to get that good introduction going throughout the time that you're writing it.
And in fiction books, what is an introduction there? What should it be?
Well, I'm not an expert in fiction. I read a massive amount of fiction. And most fiction, I think, doesn't really have an introduction. Most fiction, if some might have a prologue. might have a prologue, exactly. But most fiction goes into, chapter 1. And that, again, with fiction, if you don't hook the reader, you're going to lose them really quickly, because people have busy lives. There's always a smartphone to pick up. There's always the internet. There's always the TV. Unless you've taken yourself somewhere where none of that exists, which is very rare these days, there's always something else to be doing other than reading a book. So books have to start off with a very great hook.
Yeah. So basically, what I'm hearing, and it makes sense to me from a copywriting perspective, is that for an introduction, the basic question it's got to answer for the reader is, why should I read the rest of the book?
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yes. Why should I give this my time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So now, when it comes to this blurb, they say this little thing that they either put it on the back side of the cover or as an explanation, should I call it, in the Amazon, little explanation what this book is about. That is something like 4 or 5 lines.
Are you talking about the back cover blurb here?
Yeah. What would we prefer to add there? What would we like to write? How should it be structured? What do you think?
Tanya, I'm throwing this one at you.
All right. So I've actually written a couple of them now, or helped to write a few of them, and actually written one on my own. For me, the back cover blurb does what we've just talked about the introduction doing, but it does it in a much smaller, more focused, more pointed way, because you've only got a paragraph or so to explain what the book's about, why it's relevant to the reader, and how it's going to make their life better. I think probably of any part of editing a book, the back cover blurb is the most like copywriting, because you really are literally saying, what's the problem that the reader has that would make them want to read this book? How is the book going to solve the problem? And do it in language that the reader thinks, oh yeah, this person knows where I'm coming from. They understand me. So therefore they have some credibility for me. And I'm actually going to give this 300 pages or whatever it is that they've written in the book a go, because I believe that it's going to be worth my time to do so. Would you add anything to that, Tamara?
I would just slightly, not about the blurb itself, but on the back cover of the book, if the reader has any testimonials from people who have read the drama, having that social proof that it's been useful for other people. So very short testimonials, not these long kind of convoluted, I was, down in the dumps and this, that and the other thing happened. It needs to be very succinct, and the more powerful those testimonials can be, this is on the back cover in particular. On Amazon, it would be the reviews. You need to get those reviews as proof that people have found your book very useful, and that it's a legitimate way to spend time, because people are, we really very good at thinking, oh, look at all these people who've done this. Yeah. I should do that too. It's
all those people can't be wrong.
That's right. So that can help enormously. Even if the blurb is, even if they haven't, had Tanya look at the blurb and make it really great, it can really boost a blurb that's just ever so slightly not powerful, having testimonials in there.
And how this blurb can be as powerful as it can get. I mean, should it be something like on the third phase, something like this amazing author comes and explains us, or should it be direct to the reader, something like, you need to read that because,
I would actually say that the more hype you put in the back cover, the less credible it becomes. So this amazing, unless it's in the testimonial, this amazing book tends to make readers kind of roll their eyes a bit and say, well, of course you'd say that. You're the author. So what I tend to recommend is that you actually start by connecting with your reader. You talk to them. You talk to them directly, so you use you language. And maybe start with a question. Do you have this problem? And then this author had this problem and she got over it by doing, she solved it by doing X. And in this book, she explains exactly the steps that she took. That might be a really good one for self-help. It's not going to work for every nonfiction book out there, but it's just, you start by grabbing your reader, hooking them, by talking directly to them. You acknowledge where they're coming from. You don't, again, you're not trying to make them feel really horrible about themselves. You're not trying to create a problem that doesn't exist, because that's really unethical. That's what some people do in their marketing, but we don't recommend it. But you compassionately meet them where they are now and say, look, do you have this problem? And let them know that there's a solution, and there's a solution because the author's found it, and they're going to share it with the reader. And I think just doing that without the hype, without this amazing book, bestseller on Amazon for 30 years. Okay, if you bestseller on Amazon for 30 years, you're doing pretty well, but...
And I'd just like to break in there, because I think that Tanja made a very important point right at the start of when she was answering the question, and that was connecting in with your reader. A lot of the advice that I give first-time authors is to go back and connect with their reader, because that, more than anything else, will guide the book and actually create a very strong book. If they forget about their reader and wander off on a tangent and start talking about all sorts of things that are missing the point, the reader will go away. Exactly. The reader will go away and do something else. They'll lose them. Whereas focusing in and connecting in with exactly who they're writing to directs the book. So, and it also serves another function when people are getting stuck writing, when they've sat down to write and they can't remember what they're meant to be writing, or they feel like they can't do it. Connecting back into their reader means that they feel like they're being of service. So I'm talking particularly about nonfiction. When you feel like you're being of service, it becomes less about what do I want to say, and more about what do they need to hear. Yeah. And that place is a really powerful thing, a powerful place to write from.
Brilliant, yeah. Now, before we move on to more editing issues, I would also like to ask your opinion on the title as well. How can you create a very good title?
I would say, can I initially feel this? I would say go back to your readers and look at the language they're using. If you have a traditional self-help, which is obviously what Hay House publish, but really any kind of nonfiction book, it exists to solve a problem for the reader. And your title should let them know what the problem is. It's especially self-help, but most nonfiction books generally exist to solve a problem for the reader. And so your title needs to let them know what that problem is. So that they know whether it's the right book for them to read or not. And
yes, absolutely. And quite often what I see is people come to me with a working title, so it's sort of what they've always just called their book in their head, as they've thought about it for years before they get to finally writing it, and then they explore a whole heap of other options, and sometimes those options are great and sometimes they're not, and a lot of the time they circle back round and end up using the first title. So don't discount that first the first thing you call your book in your head. That can really be the foundation of a good title.
And I'd like to add something to that, which is a lot of people hate the idea of having a boring title. It's like they think it's the worst possible thing in the world for them to have a boring title. But to me, there are three things when it comes to copy of any sort, and it applies to book titles as well. They need to be clear, and they can be clever and creative. It's awesome if you can be all three. But if you can only be one, be clear. Because being clever, if you're not clear, and being creative, if you're not being clear, you might feel really, really good about this title, but nobody else is going to know what it's about. And you're going to lose a lot of readers.
Yeah, that's so true. And if I can add something on that, I'm always very confused when I go to buy a book. I want to read, the chapters. What is it about? And I get very confused when the titles of the chapters are very clever and very creative, and they are like, yeah, but what
does this have to do with book topic?
Yeah.
It really is. It's an art to making things clear and clever and creative at the same time. And sometimes it's actually more effort than it's worth, and you're better to just be clear. Especially if you've got a specific audience that doesn't have a lot of patience. I tend to find with a lot of traditional business books, for example, you don't want to get too clever or creative because your audience just wants you to tell them what to do, and they don't, they want it to be as clear as possible.
Yeah, so true. And when we come to the subtitle, is it again just to be as clear as you can, or you can be a little more creative on the subtitle of the book?
Can I answer this one?
Please do.
In a way, it's if you have a clever title that's a bit creative, then the subtitle or the tagline can explain that and make that clear.
Yeah.
So if you, yes, Tanya, do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think just picking up what you were saying there, basically the title and the subtitle can complement each other. Mm-hmm. So if one is really clear and boring, the other can be quite creative and clever, and vice versa. But you've got to make sure that something is really clear in there.
Something needs to be clear. I've edited a lot of books with very clever titles, but then the subtitle, the tagline, just gets right down to business and says, the book that tells you blah, So that, it's got to be one or the other, or both. I mean, you can have a very clear title and a very clear subtitle, but
something needs to be clear in there.
Something has to be clear, otherwise people won't know what it's about.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. So now let's go to the editing part. Most people in the group, I have understood that they are attempting to edit their books their own. And, well, in my point of view, this is almost impossible, because how can you change something that you thought it was correct from the beginning when you wrote it? I don't know what you think about that. So, but if they really want to at least know some guidelines on how you edit a book,
I can
say
in there initially and then field it to you. Okay,
go ahead.
The answer is you can edit something you've written. It is absolutely possible to do so. I mean, we do it all the time with blog posts and emails and web pages. So we don't usually get somebody else to edit those for us. But they are small, and a book is very big. If you honestly have no other option but to edit it yourself, what I would say is leave a significant break between the end of finishing writing, and when I say significant, I'd say at least a month, between the end of writing and the beginning of editing. Because in that time, you'll fill your brain up with many, many other things, so you will at least be starting to see what's on the page rather than what your brain tells you is on the page, which can be very different sometimes, even for people who do this for a living. And if you're going to do that, still get somebody else to proof it for you.
Yeah.
Because you will, unless you leave a huge amount of time between finishing editing and starting to proof, you will see what you think you've written and not what you've actually written.
Absolutely.
So we don't recommend it, but if you're going to do it, that's what I'd recommend.
Absolutely. I'm totally with you, Tanya, there. And the reason you leave that gap, as Tanya said, is to give yourself a rest. It kind of allows your brain to reset, and then And also I've noticed it actually helps people remove themselves a little bit from their baby. You know, the manuscript is so important to people and to the authors that we work with, that if they haven't had that break, there's not that distance and every word seems precious. Whereas when you've had, you know, the 4, I would even recommend 6 weeks break without even opening the file, like not looking at it at all, is really important to just create that distance and be able to look at it objectively when you come back to it. The other thing I would add is that if people are actually going to employ editors, they need to at least look back over their first draft.
Absolutely.
I've had authors come to us saying, finished my manuscript, here, have it. And they haven't actually even read back over their first draft, you know, and this is where editing costs start to go up. So the more drafts that an author has done, generally the better the manuscript.
Absolutely.
The lower the editing cost. They're used to the idea that this thing will change and that it could change in really positive ways, that it will that will benefit the book. So the more drafts someone does, like I think the best work that we've ever edited had gone through, you know, 8 drafts already by the author before it got to us.
Yeah. She was particularly diligent about it. So
she was very diligent
to edit.
Yes, that was kind of the gold standard editing for us. Unless, and I'm going to put a caveat in here, so unless the author's very experienced, then, you know, I think we're currently working on a second draft or something like that. Maybe this is even a first draft that we're working on, but it has been looked over again and again, and this author has written many books. You know, I think she said this is her 37th or something. So this is, you know, she's working at the top of her game. She knows what she's doing. She's not a newbie. So, you know, I would encourage kind of first-time authors to really give it that time and space. You know, there's nothing worse than a rushed book. It feels rushed. It doesn't end up the best book it could be.
I think one other thing that I would add is, especially if you're working on your first book, it could be a really good thing to find a couple of people who are a good match for your ideal reader and get their feedback. Now, I don't recommend crowdsourcing, because the more opinions you get, the more confused you get, because everybody thinks you should do things differently. But if you can find 1 or 2 people who you know are like your ideal readers, ideally who are native English speakers if you're writing in English, or who are, you know, who have really strong language skills. I don't want to discount that some people have English as a second language and have better writing skills than many native speakers. But you want someone who has good writing skills, who can basically, who's aware of, you know, if you refer to something and you've got a huge gap that it doesn't quite make sense, or if you've got a lot of repetition in there, then they're going to be able to just notice that, even if they're not a professional editor. The value of having somebody else put their eye over your work is huge. And again, for professional editors, we do this for each other.
Yeah, and I would also say that it is important to make sure that what the person who is going to edit your book or who is going to give you feedback, they have read additional books, a lot of that style. Because, for example, if someone loves fantasy, let's say literature, and they read a business book, they don't know the jargon, they don't know the wording, they cannot tell you really if it is good or bad, because they don't know how people in business speak with each other. They need to be someone who knows the language of your readers.
Yes. And that comes back to what Tanja was saying. You know, you need to find people who are part of your ideal reader group.
Yeah.
So, you know, obviously if someone was a fantasy writer or read a lot of fantasy and had no interest in business, then it would be really quite silly to get them to read your business book, because, you know, they might
be able to proofread it for spelling and grammar, but that would be it.
Yeah.
Yeah. there are two kinds of editing when it comes to a book. The one is more close to proofreading, as I have understood, and the other one is very close to changing the entire structure of the book. For example, you might even take one chapter and put it in the end, or some 4 or 5 paragraphs, move them in another chapter. Do you do that?
Yes. So I'll start off with this one, I think, because I tend to do the first bit. Really, there are 2 main stages and a third. So there really are 3 stages of editing. There's the structural edit, which is also called the developmental edit. And then there's the copy and language edit, which is what everyone thinks editing is. And then there's the proofreading, which is
actually what some people think editing is.
Which is actually what, another lot of people think editing. So structure and development. So developmental editing, structural editing, that is about getting the concept clear the whole way through. And that's what I do. That's my specific job in Team T&T editing. So I make sure that, and we do non-fiction books. So specifically for non-fiction, we make sure that the idea is clear the whole way through, that the reader isn't lost anywhere, that there aren't any gaps that need filling, and that, that there aren't different bits that kind of need changing around. So to start with, that's a whole book scenario. So I look at the concept from the introduction all the way to the conclusion, and then we move chapters within there if we need to, and then it's a within chapter thing as well. So I go through and make sure that within each chapter the concept is clear. So at the start of the chapter, where at a particular point we get taken through some steps or through a concept to the end, and I make sure that things don't need moving around within that chapter, and that each chapter flows on to the next one. So that is the developmental edit. It makes sure that things are clear and that the reader doesn't get lost. Then when Tanja and I are working together, it goes over to Tanja, who does the copy and language edit.
Yeah.
I'll let her tell you all about that.
So the metaphor that I use for Tamara is part of the edit is if the book takes the reader on the journey from introduction to conclusion, Tamara makes sure that they take every step forward, that there are no steps missing, and that they don't sort of go for detours and go backwards at any point.
Yeah.
So then it's my turn, once I have this beautifully structured
hopefully.
But there's a couple of areas where we sort of, it's fuzzy, and
we do have crossover.
Or it could be Tamara. And so we tend to both look at that, and then it gets the benefit of 2 eyes, two sets of eyes even. Copy and language, that is about making sure that all the sentences work, not just in terms of grammatical correctness, but is this the language that the reader is actually using? Are they going to know this piece of jargon? And sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes jargon is a really good thing to include because it creates a bond with your readers. But if they don't know it, it actually distances them from you. So anytime I see jargon, I sort of say, hey, will your readers know this? Do we need to explain it? It's about looking at sentences that are this long and saying, that's really hard for a reader to follow right now. Can we split it into 3 or 4 different sentences and make sure that any reword, because it often involves rewording, making sure that that rewording is still exactly what the author wants to say and it's still exactly in their own unique voice. So my aim as an editor for the copy and language stage is that the client, the author, looks back on what we've written and says, oh my God, that is so much better and so much clearer than I could have said it, but it sounds like I said it.
Yeah.
It's got to still sound like them. Otherwise, I'm not doing my job well.
That's right. And I think the crossover where we do crossover is when I've done sort of the book as a whole and chapters, and then I start looking at paragraphs and how they fit together. And how they fit together and whether that makes sense. So once I've got all of that in place and it goes to Tanja, she can look at paragraphs and go, the language in there, if I change those sentences, suddenly this paragraph's
We need to
repeating
swap
itself.
those paragraphs around.
Yeah, and so stuff gets deleted, and it might need a little bit of shifting and changing within the paragraph level, but things shouldn't be moved around enormously at the copy and language level.
No, but I think it's probably worth mentioning as well. We talked earlier about that importance of leaving a gap and not always seeing things clearly. By the time it gets to me, Tamara's usually looked through it at least 3 times, been through it from start to finish at least 3 times.
Yeah.
I am coming to it with completely fresh eyes, and that means I will sometimes pick up on little things that she's been focusing on the big picture. So they've just kind of slipped through, and that's the benefit of having those 2 sets of eyes there.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think books have been a lot stronger because I used to edit books solo, so I did all the stages myself. And I think that the books are a lot stronger now that we have the 2 of us doing it. There is that freshness that comes in at the copy and language stage.
That's terrific. I can see that, working with a team like yours, then the book shouldn't be but brilliant when it's finished,
Well, we hope so. Look, I think that having editors look at your book is has a few things going for it, basically. You've got other eyes on your book. You've got other people thinking about it. Mm-hmm. They're people who have your best interests at heart. We tend to have the conversation if someone is going to say something really silly that might cause people to think that they're, a little bit not quite right. We have that conversation and say, look, this bit here, what were you trying to say? And all of that. So we tend to try and make the book, the end product, as good as it can possibly be. And that's because we really care. We really care about books and about the people who read them and write them. But and our reputation also rests on it. So it's a twofold thing. Mm-hmm. We don't want to have our name on something that's not particularly great. And I have actually had to have the conversation in the past with a client who I'd finished editing the book for. They emailed me and said, oh, yes, that's great. I've had some friends look over it and made some changes after we'd finalised the thing and signed it off. Mm. And I had to have the conversation with them to say, look, I'm sorry, but you need to take my name off that as the editor because you've made changes now with your friends. And I haven't looked at those. I can't put my name to something that is now changed. So that was basically, we try and guarantee the quality at the end. We do the best we can to make it the best book possible.
That's so logical, yeah. And do you, Tanja, want to add something on that, or can I ask something more?
I know Tamara has summed it up.
Okay, so what I wanted to say on that is that indeed, what can you do with people who are not coachable? You know what I mean? Because it's obvious you want to do the best, and especially what you said, that you write and you edit in a way that it seems like the person who wrote the book was never edited, actually. And that's brilliant, because most authors this is what they're afraid of, that they will have a book, they will put their soul on it, and then an editor will take it and will totally transform it into the editor's way of,
I can speak to that one.
Go right ahead.
So both Tamara and I come from a very, very similar approach and a background, that we only want to work with people that are perfect clients for us. And not everybody is going to be a perfect client for us. We're not going to be the right editors for everybody, and not everybody is going to be the right authors for us to edit. So what we tend to do is we have a process where we offer a free sample edit. Once the author has finished their manuscript, they send it to us, and we choose 3 pages that we run through our whole editing system from start to finish So Tamara does the structural, and then I do the copy and language and proofing. And we show the author exactly what it is that they're going to be getting from us, just on a micro scale on those 3 pages.
Yeah.
We do that for free. Now, there's 2 reasons that we do that. The first is we want the author to understand what they're getting. So if we don't edit in a way that they want us to edit, they'll know right up front before they've given us any money. We also get to see how they react to being edited. And if they get really defensive or upset, or, you know, they get really angry with us for changing things, we just like, nah, this client is not going to be fun to work with.
Yeah. And they're just not a good fit, you know.
They're just not a good fit for us. They don't want to someone to edit the way that we edit. And there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make them bad clients. It doesn't make them bad people. It just means that working together with us is going to be miserable for them and miserable for us. Yeah. We don't want that.
No, exactly. And it's just allowing people to see what we do. And see whether that is there, you know. Yeah.
The other thing from the client's point of view, what that does is when we do a sample edit, we can see exactly how much work is involved in editing for them. So if we know how big the book is, because we have the whole manuscript, and we know how long it takes us to do 3 pages, we can give them a really accurate idea of how long it's going to take us to do it and how much they're going to need to pay. So we give them a really, as close as we can, we give them an accurate cost right up front, and they know exactly what they're going to need to pay before they go into it. It's not, some people work on an hourly rate, but we've found that our clients like to know what they're going to pay ahead of time.
Yeah.
Yes, it's logical. And it depends. Someone might be very skilled in English language, grammar and everything, and someone else might have many issues. So it's a different
no way of knowing if we look. Yeah.
And occasionally people just put down every single thing that they've ever thought about a subject in their head. And it needs a massive amount of structuring. You know, it all needs organising and filtering and sorting out.
And that's true even if they have really good English skills.
Yeah, exactly. The writing might be terrific, but the concepts might be everywhere. So every book really is unique because every person, you know, just does it their way, and, you know, we end up dealing with it. So, and, you know, that's lovely. We love our job.
That's what people pay us to do.
That's what we do. Exactly. Yes.
How can people connect with you? How can they find you? How can they arrange a meeting and see how they can work with you?
No, we're paid by DSU.
Okay. So we do have an editing services page. It is hosted currently on my website. So that's tamaraprotassow.com. So TamaraProtass for Sam, OW.com/editing, EDITING. And that takes you to our services page, so people can read about what we do and can then contact us through there. So
I was going to say we should totally set up a bit.ly link for that.
We need a bit.ly link for that, exactly. Yes, if you'd like to have a link, I'll pass Vassia a link.
Yes, just send me one.
Which will be much easier, just a clickable thing, we often get contacted through that, and then we just start the whole process. We talk to people about what they need. I will occasionally, Tanja or I will occasionally hop on Skype just to have a quick chat before people actually send anything through to us. Essentially, we like to be as clear as we can from the very first contact about what happens, how we work, and that kind of thing, just because it's just better for everybody. You know, it's better to know exactly where you stand at every point in the journey. It's it's best to be clear. That's it.
Yeah. In Greece we say clear bills make good friends. So something like it doesn't sound very logical in English, but it's this thing that you make everything clear and then everything works properly.
That's right.
Brilliant.
Exactly.
Is there anything else you would like to add that I didn't think of asking you, or we didn't find it in the group as a question?
I just had a very small thing to say about book structure. If your people are writing nonfiction, they're having edited nonfiction for over 5 years now, I have noticed that there are actually sort of specific structures that always come through. People write in 4 very distinct ways, and I actually very soon am launching a product that is to do with those 4 structures. It explores the 4 structures, tells people how to do it, and just basically makes that planning stage a lot easier. So, if you're happy, I'll give you a link for that as well, and people can check it out and see if that would be useful.
Have something like that to offer to people so they can read it and follow it?
That's my new info product on how
great.
to start before you actually start writing, because it saves you time and money down the track. It saves you a lot of editing sort of money.
By the way, as you say that, which sounds very interesting, really, and I would really love to have the link so people can go and check it out. But I would like you to give me your thoughts on structure, because I also believe that without structure, you cannot finish a book. You might be writing and writing and writing forever.
Exactly. And that is what people don't understand. People sort of go, oh, well, I'm not going to plan my book. I'm just going to let it flow and
see where it leads.
Yes, and that's lovely. But the wonderful thing about a plan is that there is an end point. And so many people don't understand. They sort of go, oh, yes, well, a plan, it's a bit of a map, blah, blah, blah. And I say, yes, it tells you where to start and where to go, but it also tells you where to finish. Yeah. And that is so important.
Yeah, and there is this quarrel that I have read from many people in the group, and they say, I don't like structure because it reminds me of school. And I think that I will not be creative when I have a structure. So would you like to give us a different point of view on that?
Oh, I have so many different points of view on that. I think that a structure functions like a container. So, it's wonderful to be creative. You can say everyone is creative. We're all creative beings. But even choosing a medium immediately gives you structure. So, we're book people, we choose writing.
Yeah.
People could choose to write a song. They could choose to paint a picture. They could choose to draw. They could choose to dance. Even by choosing writing, they're actually choosing something over and above something else. So it's automatically structured in that way. Structuring your writing, it's a service to your reader. If you're writing a book and you want to be useful to people, it's not just an ego trip or a journal, sure, write whatever you like in an unstructured way in your journal, not a problem. But if you're writing to a particular reader and trying to be useful to them, with the aim of being useful to them, then you're actually doing them a service by structuring it. And it gives you more freedom within there to be helpful, to tell them exciting things that have happened to you, tell your stories. Giving you that structure is actually fundamental to being free creatively. It sounds like a paradox, but it really isn't. The best books have structure built in from the very start. They just do. As I said before, I'm all for journaling. I'm all for free writing. You can throw up amazing ideas that you never knew you had, but then taking that and putting it into a structure is how you get a book that is the best it can be. Really? Tanja, did you have something to add there?
I
know we're both passionate about this.
Because I have this love-hate relationship with structure. It's if I focus on structure to the exclusion of everything else, it feels like a trap. It's like it cages me.
Mm-hmm.
But without it, it's like I have no direction. I don't know what I want to say. I don't know what I want to communicate. And everything just feels all up in the air, and I feel lost. And if I feel lost, then my readers are going to feel lost. So when I'm looking at structure, and this is not just structure in a book, this is structure in my work day, this is structure in how I manage my tasks. What I try and look at is what level of structure do I need to support me without caging me? And it's a balance.
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to think of structure as the glass. So you're thirsty, you want a drink of water. You can put your face under the tap if you really want to. But if you're going to pour yourself a glass of water, if you're going to pour yourself a drink, you can't just pour it onto your table. You need the glass to hold it so that you can drink.
Yeah.
That's what structure is to me. So, yes, it is very important. And I think you'll find, if you talk to people who are fiction editors, structure is really important to a fiction story as well. The story arc, people talk about the story arc and where the climax happens in the story, or whether there's several, and how it's actually paced is the structure. Things do come down to that kind of thing. And it can feel very odd as a first-time author to think about these things. It feels a bit contrived. It feels like, you're trying to manipulate things and not just letting it be natural. But all those best-selling books have been through a process where someone has actually sat down and said, right, how, this isn't working. How can we make it better? That needs to be over here, or that needs to be here. They've all been through that process. So yes, it feels contrived, but it is actually a fundamental thing. So.
And I would venture to say that pretty much every really creative book out there that's been successful, it might look, I'm thinking stuff like Sark and like Leone's stuff. Yeah. It might look on the surface like it's very kind of free flow and hippie but if you analyze it, there's a really strong structure there.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
True. Yeah. So I have no more questions. I think that we have covered everything. I wanted to thank you both so much for participating, and I would love to have more information on your projects, both as editors and as separately, your program, and Tanja as well, you as a copywriter. Okay. So when you can send me links, for your group, you have the Facebook group.
Yep.
And I will be really happy to promote your work because it's worthy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us.
It was really fun, indeed. You make a really fun team, speaking and laughing and everything. It was really good.
Thank you, Vassia. It has been a pleasure. We love, in case you couldn't tell, we love books. We love talking about them.
Books, and some of us love being interviewed. So
that's right.
And I love being a host.
Terrific. Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you indeed.
I see you around in the Crystal Clear Copywriting Tribe.
Sure, yeah. I have this thing that I told you I want to write, and I haven't sit down to write it yet. But I will.
That'll be today, this week's goal.
Yes.
So thank you. Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.